Life Over Coffee. Conversations for transformation.
Every gardener has a garden. That is common sense, right? I mean, you could do that with your eyes closed. I mean, if you plan to take up gardening, then you must have a garden. Another necessary assumption is that it's vital to know something about gardening if your goal is to have one. Did you know it's not common sense to engage in the respected work of gardening with no clue about what it takes to be a successful gardener? When I think about gardening, I always think of my grandfather. He was a master gardener. Though I did not enjoy working in his garden during the hot summer days of my childhood, and by the way, that is an absolute true statement. I don't use the word hate hardly ever, but I could almost get up to the word hate when I thought about working in his garden, whether it was weeding all of the things that he was growing or if it was shucking corn and snapping peas on the back porch in August. And when I say garden, I don't know what that means to you, but I am not talking about square foot gardening. I am talking about acres of garden. And though I didn't enjoy it, and that is a massive understatement, I never questioned his expertise. The proof was always before my eyes. You see, Grandpa was a careful, meticulous, and skilled gardener. I'm not sure if a weed ever stayed in his garden for more than a day. From sunrise to sundown, he tended his garden. Now, he did many other things with his life, including being the town's meat cutter, which was another interesting experience for me to go to the Star Market and watch him cut meat. But he had a particular passion for gardening. He was not obsessive about gardening, but he was proactive and he was caring. He took gardening seriously, and the fruit of his hands was on full display, primarily at harvest time. Now, that's something that I did not complain about when it was all said and done. And during the winter months, when you could go to the smokehouse and the other places where he and my grandmother kept the fruit of their hands. But my grandfather, he kept one eye on the daily needs of the garden while keeping the other eye on the future harvest. And with the end in mind, he did the day-to-day work necessary to bring to completion his future hopes and expectations. It's an adage, but entirely applicable here. Grandpa got what he paid for because he invested himself in the process. Now the question might be, why am I telling you this? Why am I reliving my childhood experience with my grandpa? Well, the reason is because a gardener is an excellent analogy to what a biblical husband should aspire to be. And so this is the third chapter in my book, Centering Your Marriage on Christ. The title of this chapter is A Few Essential Qualities of an Effective Husband. Don't worry, husband, the next part will be about your wife. But we always start with the husband for, I think, what should be obvious reasons. And if you want to get this entire book, then I want you to have it. It's a free book. It's at lifeovercoffee.com. It is in our store. Currently, there are 15 books in our store, and you can have every single one of them. But this is chapter 3 in one of those books, Centering Your Marriage on Christ. And so in chapter 3, I want to accomplish two things. One, I want to envision husbands about their job description while placing the first responsibility of the marriage in their lives rather than their wives. That's my twofold purpose. The word husband comes from an Old English word, husbandman, a tiller of the soil. You can see where I'm getting my gardening analogy. We know a husbandman in our day as a gardener. Making a husband, in analogous sense, is a gardener. And so husband, every husband, husbandman, you are a gardener. If you want to know if a gardener can garden, then all you have to do is to look at his garden, which is how I learned that my grandfather was a master gardener. The proof was in the bountiful harvest that we enjoyed each fall. If you want to know if a husband is a master gardener, that he understands and practices the art of husbandry, look at his garden. His garden is his wife. If you go into the husband's house and he says that I have a garden, and he begins to tell you all about his garden standing in the living room when you cannot see his garden, you say, well, thank you, and I appreciate you applauding yourself and patting yourself on the back, but may I go out back and see your garden? I want to see it. I don't need for you to tell me about all your greatness and the things that you know and the implements that you have, the tools that you use. Let me see your garden. A husband's wife is the most explicit and accurate reflection of his gifting, attentiveness, passion, love, and leadership. Now, huge caveat for those of you husbands who are blowing a gasket right now on your tractor. I am not suggesting that she has no role in her sanctification. That is for later on in this book, Centering Your Marriage on Christ. That is chapter 4. The goal here is not to highlight her. The goal here is to highlight the role of the husband. Not the non-negotiable responsibility of the wife to love God and her husband with all of her heart, soul, mind, strength as she loves herself. Yeah, she's responsible for her own sanctification. She is responsible for loving her husband. She's responsible for carrying her weight. She's responsible for working out her own salvation with fear and trembling. But I'm talking about an aspect of marriage, the husband and wife relationship. I'm talking about his leadership role right now. Whenever a couple comes to me for counseling, one of the initial assessments that I make pertains to his wife. When someone comes to me and they say, I want you to assess this future elder. I want you to assess this leader for our ministry, for our church. One of the initial assessments that I make about the man is his wife. If their marriage is more than a few years old, I want to discern his husbandry ability, skill, gifting, leadership style, and capacities. The most obvious way to do this is by assessing his wife, his garden. You would do this if you wanted to know if the farmer knows how to build and take care of a garden. We should do this if we want to know if a husband knows how to lead someone else. Nobody has been affected more than the husband's wife. And if you're going to turn him loose into ministry to affect other people, it would be foolish, in my view, not to examine the impact that he has had on the person who has been closest to him, not just in the public space, but also in the private domain as well, because he cannot hide himself completely from her. He's more exposed. His skills have more effect because they live in a 24/7 relationship. She becomes exhibit A to his effect on her. I want to know how his performance as a husband has affected her. And so I do not ask him about these things because more objective data is sitting in the room with us. It's her. It's formulaic. Husband equals gardener. Wife equals garden. We see this worldview more clearly in Ephesians as it pertains to our Savior. He's the model for all husbands whom Paul calls us to lay down our lives for our wives. Dying for your wife is a non-negotiable essential when talking about the art of husbandry. There are many more things involved in being a good husband, but laying down your life for your wife is high on the list. Paul talked about it this way. You're very familiar with the passage, Ephesians 5:25 through 27. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word, so that he might present the church to himself in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish. Now we are familiar with the first part of this text. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. And though we see what Christ did, he laid down his life, we don't talk as much about what he gets in return for his work. Now, unfortunately, some people in the past have unwittingly taught that love is giving yourself to another person with no expectation of anything in return. That is fallacious teaching. We should expect something in return for the work of our hands. My grandfather expected something in return for the work of his hands. That is normal. Christ expects something in return, and this text says that he will present the church to himself. Now, the caution comes when we demand something in return. Where my grandfather stands on the edge of the field yelling at the plants, "You will grow, you will be luxurious, you will be nutritious, you will help me, you will bless me in the fall. I demand it." No, we can't demand something in return, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't expect it. We want the work of our hands to come alive. We want to see it, but we cannot let it control us. And that is a caveat for many husbands who do the work, but their wives are resistant and they're not seeing the work of their hands the way that they expect it. And sometimes they can become sinfully angry, complicating the problem because their wives are not returning on the investment. But it's never wrong to expect it, that Christ might present the church to himself in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish. Do you see what Christ gets for his effort? He will receive in some future day the work of his hands. You could say it this way: he will get a return on his investment. Paul pushes this gospel truth right into the heart of our marriages by exhorting us about how husbands have a responsibility in the overall sanctification and the care for their wives. If a husband has been gardening for a few years, there will be objective evidence of his labors, as seen in his garden, in his wife. These results could be negative, they could be positive, depending on the husband's work, and of course his wife's cooperation. I will go back to that because, again, I don't want the husbands to blow a gasket on their tractors thinking that I am releasing wives from any responsibility in the process. No, they have to grow, they have to respond. She becomes exhibit A of what he has been doing since he married her. If he has been working hard, cultivating the ground of her heart, she will more than likely be responding positively. Now, no doubt, there will be some husbands that are reading or listening to this and they're saying, "Rick, you have lost your cotton-picking mind. You don't know my wife. If you were married to her, you would not be so presumptuous about this gardening thing." Well, it would be accurate to say that I don't know your wife. However, it would be problematic for any husband to frame his initial response this way. In my counseling experience, I have never interacted with a troubled marriage where both partners were not at fault. I get it. I understand. I've been doing this for a minute or two. Of course, she has a role to play. But it would be preposterous to think otherwise. However, the most likely person to begin with when restoring a marriage is the husband, because he is the leader of the home. If a ship is going down, I want to talk to the captain of the vessel first, not his first mate. Too many times the husband will shrink back from his role in the gardening process by talking about how his wife is the main problem. This tactic, even though he might have a valid point, is not how any biblical husband should begin talking about the problems in his marriage. If he is humble, he will want to own his role in their dysfunction rather than taking a blame-shifting stance. The wise gardener will want to figure out what he needs to do first, not what the plants need to do first. The husband should always begin with his failure in a marriage gone sour. Now, I know that your wife has issues. I get it. She's got weeds. The doctrine of sin informs me about this. Her martyrology, anthropology, we know that she has fallen, and we know that the doctrine of sin is operative in her life. My wife has problems too. But whatever they are, they cannot be my starting point, and that is the point. I mean, Who is not messed up? None of us was a prize worth saving when God redeemed us from destruction. Still, Christ did not look at us and chose to pass on us because the difficulties and the challenges of the task at hand were too daunting. He rolled up his sleeves and began digging into the weeds of our lives entangled around our hearts, and he did this by setting aside his life and dying for us. It would be misguided for a husband to begin complaining about his wife before addressing his gardening deficiencies. If you want to grow in the art of husbandry, do not begin by cursing the soil. Begin with your heart. A wife would have to be unsaved, or a wife would have to be insane, not to respond to a humble man who is seeking to understand her, love her, and lead her. Now, admittedly, there are exceptions. There are some women that can be plain mean. And I have counseled a few of them. And as I've looked at their husbands, it was no question that these women are unbelievably mean. But in most cases, being mean is not how they want to be. It's not how they were once upon a time. And I am not excusing their current meanness or letting them off the sanctification hook. But I'm also not ignoring the deficiencies of the gardener that they married. In today's culture, dads have not trained boys to be husbands. It's almost an assumption that these kids will unlock the mysteries of the art of husbandry after they are married. They will not. The ignorance that they bring into their marriages will stay in their marriages if nobody helps them before their marriages. If your marriage is still in its infancy, it would be understandable why you may be a novice in the art of husbandry. I get it. It takes a while. There's a learning curve. It's also understandable that your garden, your wife, may have more work than an older, more mature wife or garden might have. But if you have been married for 5 years or more, then your wife is Exhibit A. She is an objective representation of your love and your care, your gardening prowess. If your wife has a lot of weeds, well, if you're not sure how to proceed, then I would encourage you to find help. If you realize after you bought this garden, after you married this garden, and it's like, whoa, there are things that I did not see in this garden that I was blind to, because love will blind you to the realities of a garden. Well, then ask your small group leader or your pastor to give you some assistance in the art of husbandry. Spend dedicated time learning the art of husbandry. There's no shame in admitting ignorance. We all must learn at some point. By all means, do not become angry or frustrated or apathetic or disappointed if your garden is not meeting your expectations. Cursing the sun or cursing the dirt, that is not the path forward. Those responses will not help your circumstances. My grandfather knew how to grow stuff. Though he may have been perplexed or occasionally stumped, he always persevered with a little hope and a whole lot of sweat. A friend of mine recently commented to me that she rarely sees couples who have been married for a while and they're still in love with each other. Now, isn't that a sad commentary on our Christian marriages? Too many marriages are more snippy than playful, more critical than encouraging, more hopeless than joyful, more business partners than lovers, more like an arranged marriage than a passionate romance, more like a chore to endure than a union to enjoy. Marriage problems are not how things ought to stay. We have the transformative power of the gospel working in us. We have the Word of God to guide us. We have the Spirit of God to illuminate us. We have the community of God to come around us. The weeds of this world should never choke out the practical wisdom and the power that God provides for His children. Now, this is chapter 3 of my book, Centering Your Marriage on Christ. It is a workbook, and throughout these first 3 chapters, I have asked a ton of questions. If you have not gotten this book yet, then please go to lifeovercoffee.com. Go to our store, and there are 15 books waiting for you right now. Some of you will listen to this years later, and there will be a whole lot more books by the grace of God. and I hope this one is still there for you. But download it and then give the link to a friend. There's no catch, there's no trick here. This is our joy, this is our pleasure, this is my passion to give these resources away. I want as many people as possible to have these resources. My unstated mission statement is to take the practical message of Christ to every human on the planet and to live 25 years after I die. Some of you will download this book after I die, and you will be fulfilling my mission statement. I want to continue to reach people long after I have left this sphere. And you can do that by going to lifeovercoffee.com and getting this free book, Centering Your Marriage on Christ. And so now that you have the vision about gardening and the art of husbandry, let's make it practical, men. I want to give you a few questions that I would like for you to think about and apply. If you are a journaling person, and I know a lot of people aren't, but I want to put that out there. I like to write. Writing is what I do. Writing is my happy place. Nothing brings me more joy, and maybe I messed up, but nothing brings me more joy than to write. Just to take thoughts from my brain and to bring it down into a succinct fashion and communicate it on a computer screen now. It used to be journals. I have scores of them in my attic where I've been writing since 1994. I'm doing this podcast video in 2024. So that's 04-14. For 30 years I have been writing, and that is something that I enjoy doing. I love doing it. It's my passion. It helps me to think clearly. It helps me to process. It keeps my mind sharp as it can be. But I know everybody's not like that. If you're not, you can reflect. If you're not writing during your quiet times, perhaps you can find a close friend to whom you can talk to about this chapter 3, a few essential qualities of an effective husband. And here's the questions that I want you to reflect upon with the hope of changing yourself and then, of course, working on your marriage. Now, I have 10 questions here, and so let's work through them. Number 1, how would you rate your passion for husbandry? And in what ways do you need to change? I mean, maybe it's like, man, I got married for the wrong reasons. I don't even like gardening. That could be true. Well, there's grace for that. There's a Bible that will help you, and there's friends that will come alongside you. Sometimes when you get into a vocation, you go to college, you get a 4-year degree in something, and then you step out in life and you're fulfilling that degree and you realize, man, that was a mistake. I don't want to do this. Well, sometimes in marriages we can be stumped like that as well, and we need persevering grace to be able to move forward because there isn't an exit strategy. I know some people will take divorce, and yes, there can be a biblical reason for it. But let's not think about exit strategies. Let's think about how we can change. So how would you rate your passion for husbandry? Number 2, what is your general assessment of your marriage, and how do you need to change it to make it better? And I trust that as you think about how to change your marriage, that you do start with the log in your eye, that you address yourself first and don't make this all about your wife. Number 3, what tools do you need to become a better husbandman? Now, I trust that this book, Centering Your Marriage on Christ, will be one of those tools. We have thousands of other resources at lifeovercoffee.com. We also have a supporting membership where people become financial partners with us, and with that, our Leaders Over Coffee membership level, for example. Every day, Monday through Friday, I put out a video for our leaders. It's an equipping video to help them in their personal life, in their marriage. These things have been transformative. We have many people, many leaders over coffee who watch these videos, and then you have the full archive, and we have hundreds upon hundreds of those videos already banked. All of those are accessible for you as a leader over coffee. We also have a private forum where you can dialogue with our team and with other members in the leadership Leader Over Coffee community. And so make sure that you avail yourself to all the tools that are necessary to help you to become a better husbandman. Number 4, what are your husbandry weaknesses? Now, I would encourage you to have a conversation with someone about this. If you are a leader over coffee, then you're welcome to talk on our forums with our community, and let's talk it out about your husbandry weaknesses and see how we can motivate you by grace to do what you need to change. Number 5, Will you go to a trusted friend and ask him to give his honest assessment of you as a husband? What did he say? Now, you need a friend who has the courage and the grace, the compassion as well. You don't want a harsh friend, but you want a competent friend who has courage, that they will not rubber stamp you, and they will see things that you might not see, or maybe you do see them and you just need somebody to outline them for you. Number 6, how much time and in what ways do you pray for your wife? Will you begin praying more for her in specific ways? For many husbands, this is actually a key to help them to have a better attitude toward their wives. It will also dramatically change their marriage if you're praying for your wife and asking God's favor upon her, praying in specific ways for her. That can be revolutionary in your marriage. How often, how much time, and in what ways do you pray for your wife? Will you begin praying more for her in specific ways? Number 7, write out the fruit of the Spirit in Galatians 5, 22 and 23, those 2 verses. And rate your wife in each one of these 9 areas: love, joy, peace, etc. How is she doing in all 9 of these areas? Be kind, be gracious, log in your I, but be honest. We have to have an honest assessment. Now, maybe your assessment is all wrong, or maybe it's partly wrong, but it's your assessment. That's what's important. It's your assessment. What do you really think? How do you really see her? Be honest. Now, maybe this is something that you can't show her, but what you're rating here is your husbandry skills. What you're rating here is your garden. And so as you look out on your garden and you rate it and everything is negative, well, then don't think so much about the garden. Don't curse the sun or the soil. Think about you, the gardener, and how can I change to be a better gardener so this fruit can look a little bit better? Number 8, what practical things can you do to help her better represent or model the fruit of the Spirit in her life? Number 9, go to your wife and discuss with her what you have journaled and reflected on during your quiet times. Now, big caveat here, your marriage might not be in a place where it can sustain this kind of transparency, and so I'll just put that footnote there and let wisdom be your guide. Number 10, ask her opinion about these matters and pray together, asking the Father for his continued intervening care in your marriage. Now, in the first part of this chapter here, again, this is chapter 3, a few essential qualities of an effective husband. I use several words in the first part, and I'm going to list those words for you. If you replay the tape, you'll hear all these words, but you don't have to do that. I'm going to list them for you. And what I would like for you to do as an exercise, and you'll find this in the chapter in the book, Centering Your Marriage on Christ. Write out the first thing that comes to your mind as you think about yourself as a husbandman. And then after you finish this assignment, go to a trusted friend and ask him to help you change in areas where you need to change. Now, here are 15 words or expressions that I use when I open up this particular chapter a few moments ago. And so first thing that comes to mind, I use these words talking about my grandfather: expert, careful, meticulous, skilled, tending his garden, passion, proactive, caring, serious, harvest, end in mind, that eschatological future hope, daily work, future hope, expectations, invested. Those are the 15 words that I use. Now, you can go to this chapter, number 3. You can list these words down a page and then just write out the first thing that comes to your mind, plus all the other questions that I have asked you. By all means, get this book, Centering Your Marriage on Christ. It is a workbook. You can find it in our store, lifeovercoffee.com. It is free. Our policy is, if you get the book, you have to share it with 1,000 of your closest friends. And so please give them the link to our store. There's no catch. There's no trick here. We honestly, transparently, we want to get the practical message of Christ out to as many people as possible. That's it. That's the bottom line. And you can help us to do that. If you are a local church and you benefit from our resources and you're in a position to where you can support us as a ministry, will you do it? We need monthly support. We need annual support. We need churches coming alongside us to help us. We're reaching hundreds of thousands of people every year. We go around the world every day. The practical message of Christ is going forth. People are downloading this content in every country that you can imagine. They all come and they all download our resources. They're getting it. And for that, I'm very thankful. But we need your help. Local church, if you can support us on a monthly or annual basis, I would really appreciate it. Otherwise, go to the store, get this free book, Centering Your Marriage on Christ.
Thanks for joining us. Learn more and get access to other resources at lifeovercoffee.com.